We can't use any of this. You know, I always have that at the beginning where it's just something super funny for like 10 seconds. I'm like, we can't use anything we've said so far.
Hey guys, I'm Chase Smith. This is Nigel Robinson. You're listening to Hyperlink, a podcast journey. Today we journey through Genesis chapter 11. We will be discussing the connection of the Tower of Babel to the larger biblical narrative, as well as how it juxtaposes the genealogy of Shem. Enjoy the fruit of the serpent.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chase. Let's just jump right into the text today. Let's start in Genesis chapter 11, verse 1.
Just that one verse?
No, we're gonna you just read.
I'll read till you tell me.
I will interrupt you at some point.
I like this.
Yeah.
It's a good relationship we have. Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. And it came about as they journeyed east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. Who's they?
Who's they?
Yeah.
Who's they? This is the people. This is a lot of it's the descendants of Ham, and Japheth probably, but it's mostly the descendants of Ham that we seem to be following here. And so how does it start? All earth has what? One language.
One language.
And where did they go?
They went to
They moved
the land
which way?
of Shinar. East. They went east.
East. What does east mean? Remember what east is? East is always bad. Bad, like Michael Jackson. East is always bad.
I'm bad. Okay.
To know it. All right. Yeah, east is always bad. Do you remember why east is bad?
I mean,
so far we've already learned it in the biblical text.
Yes, we have.
Adam and Eve were banished.
They were banished east.
East. The angel was set on the west part of the garden, which means they were banished east.
Yeah.
And then, on top of that, right?
East of Eden.
East of Eden, yeah.
That's what was going through my head, but I couldn't remember why.
And then when Cain journeyed away after his being even more banished.
Yeah, he banished. Square.
He went where?
East.
East. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Cain journeyed further east. So east in the biblical narrative is always is typically at least representative of going further away from the original plan of God. We're moving away from the plan of God. So
which, side note, this was written in Hebrew. Hebrew is written right to left, which was technically east to west. So when you're reading Hebrew, you're actually going west.
If you're facing north.
Right. But like that whole you know, directionally, I just thought I think that's interesting.
That's very interesting.
It's the one language that, at least the one that I know of, that reads right.
That's very interesting. I like
it.
I like it. That's interesting. I have to dwell on that a little bit more. If you remember last episode, though, guys, the story of Noah's curse seemed to parallel the story of the fall. And we talked about the story of the flood paralleling the story of creation. So could it be this story parallels the next story after the fall?
Always.
Cain and Abel. I mean, we've already brought up Cain.
Yeah.
Like, of course. No, the Bible can't be that incredible, can it, Chase?
Yeah. Always.
So let's keep reading and see if we can find some more parallels. So far we have journeying east. Let's keep going. Just keep reading.
Okay. So verse 3, and they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they used brick for stone, and they used tar for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city, and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. And let us make ourselves a name, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. It's nice of him to visit.
It really is.
I mean, God visits your city. It's got to be something. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. And this is what they began to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them." Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth.
Awesome. Thank you, Chase.
Sounds like there's a chiasm in there somewhere.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. We'll get there. There is a chiasm, and if you don't know what that is, guess what? There's an episode
Groundwork.
in Groundwork, episode 3, called Chiasms and Lightsabers, and yes, there is some Jedi mentions in there.
Always.
But that being said,
Even Star Wars, hyperlinks
Star
to the
Wars.
Bible.
It
Just so you
can.
know.
If you, it really can. If you clicked on it, it would. It really would. In multiple ways, actually.
Yeah.
But we digress. That's not what this story is about. What this story is, let's see what kind of parallels, similarities we found in these two stories. You have the second, what I call a second temptation, or what the Cain and Abel story, and you have the tower. Okay, so in both stories, there's a city, right? Cain, after he leaves, he builds a city. He names it. Do you remember what he names it? He names it Enoch.
Enoch.
Yeah, right after his son. So there's a city being built in both cities. Both of them move east. Okay, that's part of it. Okay, there's a desire to acquire more in Cain and Abel's story, and a desire to make a name for themselves, to achieve more, to one's acquire more and one's achieve more. Cain's name literally means to acquire. So then there's a curse on Cain's strength, because Cain was a worker of the ground. And the curse was on the ground. And there's a curse on the strength, if you will, if you call it a curse. But there's a curse. There's something on the strength of the Tower of Babel, which is what?
The curse on the Tower of Babel?
Yeah, what's the strength of Tower of Babel?
It's their language.
Their language. They're one people with one language. Cain and Abel's story, there's an offering to God. Here, there's an offering to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're building the tower for themselves.
Which is interesting that they're building it to heaven. Like, I don't know if it's, you would know, I feel a little bit more on, than me on this, but like, it does say to heaven. Does that just mean to the sky, or are they literally, was their heart, do we know, like actually trying to get to heaven?
I mean,
Is
only
it just
God knows.
concept?
Only God knows the heart, Chase. Now,
Easy answer.
I have my own theories. Some people believe couple of different things around this. I lean toward that they were building a tower to the heavens to appease or to gratify some deity that they were worshiping. So I believe it was some kind of and even if that deity was Nimrod, which we'll get to, because Nimrod basically was a king, and he was already considered a mighty man in the time. And so referencing back to the Nephilim and the giants, if you will, which we also talked about, the giants might meaning like giants of industry. So like Nimrod was great at like hunting, and so he became a king. People followed him, and eventually became a king. And so it could be that building to like the heavens to appease like this great God. Those are kind of where I lean, much like much like most towers and things in the ancient world were built as like altars, not like altars, or as what's the word I'm looking for?
Like a beacon, or like something to basically be seen for.
Yeah, like our God is great.
while.
Look at what we can accomplish because
Right.
of our God, and this is a monument.
Monument.
That's the word.
Yeah.
This is a monument to them. So that's how I see it. That's how I interpret it. But you could interpret it that they were actually trying to get to heaven, which is also interesting. And I think you could like take that liberty and it'd be okay. And I think it's still the idea to me is the same. Like their heart is trying to get to God, to appease God, to become God, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is interesting because like heaven to me, it's like if God dwells within you, there's nowhere to go. So
this is before anybody learned anything about that.
Of course.
Chase. But yes,
I'm just saying.
Yeah, just saying. Well, I mean, maybe because we are image bearers, right? So from the very beginning, we kind of have that concept going.
Yeah.
And Yeah, so there's something there. All right.
They're not resting, that's for sure.
They're not. They're not resting. They're not Noah-ing.
No.
Okay, so let's keep moving though. So what other parallels do we have? So cultivating and ranching is a new thing in the story of Cain and Abel. Like we hadn't seen that before. And then you have bricks. They're a new technology in this story, right?
Right. And it's interesting, not just bricks, but highly fired bricks.
Yeah, like really strong, powerful.
Yeah.
They're excelling. We also have God sees what Cain did, like, right? And we have God sees what these men are doing, like what these people are doing. God speaks to Cain. God speaks to himself in the story of the tower.
Yep.
And then Cain fears his punishment. Like, it's too great, God, that's too much. And here, the people actually preemptively fear their punishment. They're like, let us do this so we will not be scattered.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so this is all on purpose. And this is what it is that this is kind of what the Bible sometimes uses these parallels to point us to something. And oftentimes they're found in the similarities, but sometimes they're found in the differences. So there are actually like similarities, and then there's like glaring differences in some of the story. And that's sometimes what we're going to focus on a little bit today. The key is not necessarily what's the same, but what's actually different. So God is more into, like, and we talked about this last, is God more into what we think or how we think, like how it affects our mindset?
Yeah.
And
how? I'm just going to answer that.
How? Thank you. I was hoping somebody would, and you're the only one here. All right. And how? The latter, right? The how. Like, that's a callback to, again, our last groundwork episode. Sorry to do all these callbacks, but like we're at the point now where all the groundwork episodes start to culminate and they make sense.
Yeah.
Why we started there. And so because we're so far into the story, this is the last of the first 11 of the Bible. Like, this is it. So but we're gonna dive in some now, and we're gonna really see the parallel. So we're fresh off the heels of chapter 10. And what happened there, Chase? Chapter 10, last episode. What did we talk about?
The sons of Noah, and what they did, what they didn't do, their genealogies and the cursing.
Yeah.
All over the place.
Yeah, we followed the genealogy of Ham mostly. I mean, we didn't read the other ones, but it's there. But we followed the Ham, the seed of the serpent, and it's spreading chaos. And here we get into chapter 11, and it's not just spreading chaos, it's actually organizing chaos now. There's chaos that's starting to organize itself, like evil starting to like come together, and there's a powerful city behind it. Like, there's this city now that is organizing evil. And the first thing I want to point out is that they settled, and they wanted to make a name for themselves. So remember the Hebrew word for name? Shem, which is Shem's name. Goes back to Genesis 6:4, which we read last episode. But the seed of the serpent seems to be all about making a name for himself or themselves. And that's evil. As people of God, we need to be about making Jesus' name famous, not ourselves. And we'll see that theme continue over and over in the scriptures. Let's talk about a couple examples because they hyperlink back what I believe to some of these moments here. Saul was mad at David. Why? Because David got more adulation than he did. You know, Saul killed 1,000, David 10,000. That's how I hear the song. I don't know how you guys do.
Something like that.
Something like that. It might have been a little different.
There's
Maybe it was in a minor key, but whatever.
But yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, David was about what? Making Yahweh famous. Like, he wanted so badly to build a temple to the Lord. He wanted to bring the ark into Jerusalem. David had all his faults, don't get me wrong, but he was about bringing God and making God famous more than he was about his own. Right? Solomon was his son, and he was about making Israel and his kingdom famous more than he was about making God famous, right? Yeah, he built God's temple as, like, you know, a tribute in one sense to his father. But if you follow like his story, like, he's just spread out, and he had like you know, he occupied several areas. He built out like literally an empire for Israel. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And then what about the statue that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah refused to bow down to? Yes.
Thank you for using their Hebrew names.
Yes. If you don't know who we're talking about, look it up. Like, that's just homework. They were
I
to bow
appreciate
down
that.
to a statue of a man who was making a name for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the villain of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was Isaiah's prophecy about the king of Babylon? Read Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12 through 15, Chase.
Perfect. How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to the earth, you who have weakened the nations. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit in the mountain of assembly, in the recesses of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will make myself like the Most High. Nevertheless, you will be thrust down to Sheol, to the recesses of the pit.
Yeah. Like, this just so reminds me of the Tower of Babel. Like, we will ascend to the heavens and we're going to build a tower to the sky.
Yeah.
And this is like later on, Babylon and Babel is the same place, right? So Babylon and Babel is the same place. So this is the king, the lineage. We talked about that. Like, the choices changed your lineage, and the lineage of the people, of the kings, of that mindset of Babel is still to build to the heavens. And Isaiah's like, but you're going to be cast down to Sheol. Like, your plans are going to fail. They're going to fail. When you try to make a name for yourself, your plans will eventually fail. It's not a good thing to focus on your name above God's name.
Yeah.
So let's keep moving. Sorry about that, a little preachy preach. But let's and what, like, they were worried. Like, the people of the Tower of Babel were worried in the story about being scattered. Did you want to add something?
I did.
Sorry, let's go back.
I think that it's important as we continue to read. Like, a lot of the times we look at this as God punishing people. That's one perspective. And yes, there's this, like, if you are going to go and try and make a name for yourself, you're going to make this tower, then the opposite will happen to you, right? Every time I read this story, if you change your perspective just a little bit, you see a loving father who says, these guys are going to ruin themselves because this is not the way that life is set up. And so a good father comes down and he saves the people from themselves. He saves them from continuing further destruction, right? Obviously, there's the flood. But I think it's important as we continue to read, we're all humans, we're reading a story about people, that what God does as a loving father is grace, and that we can either look at it from a lack mindset, which is punishment and doom and gloom, or we can look at it and saying, this could have gotten a lot worse, and God did the thing that saves them or helps continue and perpetuate their life cycles. Not the way that they planned, that's for sure. But I think that's just worth noting.
Yes.
This is grace.
Yeah, nowhere in the Tower of Babel story does it say it's a punishment or there's a curse. It doesn't say let's curse them. There's none of that language in this story, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that's directly, I believe at least, it connects to what we talked about in Genesis chapter 9, where now man will be judged by man. And so I think there's a little bit of that being played out in the story. However, God does, like, make their fear come to fruition, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because what did they actually fear? And this gonna tie right into what you said, Chase. But what do they actually fear?
They fear that they were going to be scattered. They recognized community was important.
They fear,
or
yes,
togetherness, or unity.
But they feared that they were going to be scattered, right?
Mm-hmm.
But scattered abroad or scattered across the earth is kind of what it says.
Yeah.
But what was
is that the fear of being alone? I mean, what do you think?
No. What I'm trying to get, I don't know why they feared that. It's actually, like, it baffles me. Like, why this is their fear.
Yeah.
But here's what I do know. In Genesis 1:28, the Lord commands us to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. They were not filling the earth. They were stopping that part.
Gotcha.
And like you said, like, this is going to destroy them. This isn't good. And, like, this is not the original plan. The original plan wasn't this. The original plan is for you guys to be scattered abroad, scattered abroad the earth. this is not the plan. This is not what God wanted Adam and Eve. He said to be fruitful, multiply, and scatter throughout the world.
Yeah.
And here they're doing the exact opposite.
You can't bring heaven to earth if you're stuck in one spot.
Exactly. And God says, hey, come let us. He's talking to himself. Trinity here, guys. There's people say the Trinity isn't relevant in the Old Testament. Who's God talking to then? Come let us. He's talking to himself. All right, so come let us come down and look at like the city, the tower, the sons of man built. Now this is important because this is really the first time the word sons of man is used. Like we had the daughters of man earlier, but now we have the sons of man. So this is new language. This is the literal Hebrew is Ben Adam, sons of man. And this is not a positive phrase because of how it starts. These are the villains, if you will. These are the bad guys. These are the ones propagating chaos and evil.
Yeah.
Running away from the call of God to go be fruitful, multiply, and scatter, right?
Yeah.
So, but what's interesting as well is that the word here for tower is amygdal. I think I said that right. Well, I might be off. But comes from the word gedal. Funny enough, the word gedal actually comes up a little bit later in referencing Abram. God promises to make him a great or gedal nation. But here they're building a tower, a migdal, a great tower, trying to make their name great, lasting, trying to bring renown to them. And the very next chapter, God is going to pick a man who is doing the exact opposite and make him a great nation. And we'll get there later on, but that's just a little extra. But let me ask you.
That's free.
This is a question for you, Chase. Is there one name mentioned in the Tower of Babel story?
Besides Babel?
That's the name of a city. Is there a name of a human?
The name of the human
mentioned? These people who wanted to make their name great. Do you even know their name?
No.
Like
yeah. That's funny.
Sandwiched in between two genealogies, which are literally all names.
Right. Yeah.
There's a story in between two genealogies, which is kind of a part of the genealogy, if you will. Because it really kind of is. It's like a little side note, like, and this is what happened. This is how we got the nations that we have and why we have different languages.
Yeah.
And let's come back to the genealogy of Shem, right? So it kind of does that. But sandwiched between two genealogies is a story where not a single name is mentioned. Like it has to be on purpose. And yes, scholars believe Nimrod was the king of Babel at this time, but it doesn't say it. It just doesn't say it.
Yeah.
There's historical texts outside of the Bible that seem to say that. Sure, fantastic. The Bible doesn't for a reason.
Right.
It's on purpose. It's on purpose. Why? They were trying to make a name for themselves, and their names aren't remembered. And yet, God's going to pick Abram, who turns into Abraham, who he changes his name. Names are important. Changes his name, and his name is literally going to be remembered for always in eternity.
Yeah.
Like it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they still call him that to this day. We still call him that to this day because Abram's name, it lasted. Why? We'll get there for another episode, possibly.
The matter of the heart. We could say that too. But
always. In the biblical narrative, though, a city is often bad. Like Cain's city with Enoch, named Enoch, it's not good. It's not the Enoch that walked with God. It's Cain's son Enoch. Not good. Now here we have the Tower of Babel. The next city that we kind of run into is Sodom and Gomorrah. Like not good at all. Then you got Egypt, not good. Like cities tend to not be good, but cities do get redeemed in the biblical narrative. The city of God. Just
Are you referring to Zion?
Yes.
Okay.
They call it the city of God.
Yeah.
There's a whole book called The City of God. But yeah, that's like, yeah. We're talking about like the new Jerusalem coming down, the city.
Yes.
Like oftentimes we're like, oh, it starts in a garden, it's gonna end in a garden. No. Like it starts in a garden, but it ends with the whole city coming down. We're not there. But like that's just like it's a city coming down. And just like this is so good, guys. Just I'm so excited about this. Just like the city is bad, but it gets redeemed. Like it's not inherently bad, but it's symbolically bad within the biblical narrative, and it gets redeemed within the biblical narrative. The nations and the languages seem to be a negative thing here, but how does the story end? All nations, people, tribes, and tongues will come to the city of God, will be gathered again in unity. But this time to lift up whose name?
God's.
Yeah. They were so close yet so far away. Right? And how does God choose to make that happen? A man named Jesus makes it possible. And his disciples and you and I partner with God, keep his mission going. That, again, getting way ahead of ourselves. But let's zoom back in to this story. Just so good to think about that.
It is. I mean, that's why we do what we do. My personal life passion can be summed up in heaven coming to earth. Like that is, and we are all bridges if we choose to be.
That's what Jesus prayed, right? Your kingdom come, your will be done. Yes.
Yeah. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all will be added.
So let's get back to the story, Tower of Babel. We get another element here is bricks, right? Who are the first hearers? I keep coming back to this because we forget who is listening to this story for the first time.
Yep.
They're Israelites.
Israelites who made bricks. There's even a whole chapter about how they couldn't do it with straw. Like they were pros at it, essentially.
Yeah. This is the story said to Israelites who are fresh off the hills of making bricks for 400 plus years. And it all comes from the same line, like Ham. Like, talk about some furious people. Come on, Ham. Seriously, bro?
Yeah.
Come on, bro. The story has so many negative themes throughout it. Like, this is just showing us negative theme after negative theme after negative theme that you'll see throughout the biblical text, throughout the Old and New Testament. East, the city, bricks, the lineage of nations and tongues. But this is all a result of what? The fruit of the seed of the serpent. This is the fruit. This is the fruit of the seed of the serpent. You let chaos run. You let the seed of the serpent go, and what do you get? You get chaos. You get unfinished work. That's something there. You get division. You get people not understanding each other.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but it sounds nothing like today.
Yeah, this is what happens when the cycle. This is what happens when the cycle is not ended. This is what it looks like to continue sin, to continue the cycle, your loops, essentially.
Yeah. To propagate your name, someone else's name besides God's. This is what it looks like. This is the fruit of the seed of the serpent, just completely done, and it all points, it all points to bad.
Yeah,
not good. Again, there's nothing inherently wrong with a city. There's nothing inherently wrong with a brick. There's nothing inherently wrong with east of wherever you live.
Yeah.
There's nothing inherently wrong with those. This is symbolic, guys.
Yeah.
And showing us like this is the fruit. And it just gets worse and worse. And it starts to layer and layer. And the longer you live in that, the longer your society and a society goes toward that, the fruit of the serpent gets heavier and heavier, and division and strife and all these fruits begin to just rise.
This odes to like the way that we learn how, like even as kids, like if you touch a fire and you get burnt, you touch a fire and you get burnt, you touch a fire and you get burnt, you're gonna learn eventually that there's a pattern there. Patterns are how we pick up on where we are. Because awareness and presence, I am convinced, is the key to part of that key to bringing heaven to earth. If you can be aware of what you're doing, then you can more easily choose life. Patterns are grace, And what I consistently see in my own life, and also, but like in Scripture, we're seeing patterns. We're seeing chiasms. They're all patterns. They're all like ways in which it's like, hey, God's like, wake up, look and see what you're doing. This hurts for a reason. And once you take a step back and you stop and you go, oh, maybe I'll end this cycle by learning this lesson. You're reversing that curse. You are going back to heaven. And I just think that that's like, these are things that we don't see in everyday life, that if we stop for a minute and go, oh wow, the way that life is ran on planet Earth by God is, if you can notice your loops and your patterns, that's grace to choose something different. To choose heaven.
Choose life.
Choose life.
Yeah. And you mentioned something, a chiasm. You mentioned it earlier too. Guess what? There was a chiasm within this story.
Surprise.
Guys. Surprise, right? There's a lot of repetition here, right?
Yeah.
You got language is a repetition, city is repetition, scattered is repetition. You see it on both sides of the chiasm. And I'm not going to point out the whole chiasm to you. Go find it. Look yourself. It's fantastic. If you don't know what that is, again, go back. Chiasms, lightsabers. But it's all points to Genesis chapter 11, verse 4b. And it's when you tried to make a name for yourself. They wanted to make a name for themselves. This is the ending. This is what happens. This is the fruit of making a name for yourself. This is what Cain was doing. This is far from the biblical narrative. In the end of the fruit, this is the end of the fruit of the serpent, right? But let's talk about something here. Like, that's so key. It says that God comes down. Chase, this is the first time in the biblical narrative that God comes down, God talks, and no human hears or sees him. Since creation, right? God said, let us make man in our image. And that's when he's talking, again, to himself, to another God. Not another God, but Jesus, Holy Spirit, all there. Boom. Let us make man in our image. Cool. Fantastic. Awesome. And ever since then, when God talks, it's to Adam, it's to Cain, it's to Noah. God speaking. And then here we get God speaking to himself again. This is the first time God starts to speak and no one hears. When you focus on your tower, your name, your little kingdom, on your empire, and God comes down to check it out, you won't even notice that he's around.
Yeah, most kids, Dad, come look at what I built.
Yeah.
Look at this thing. Look at how cool it is. Not this time.
Because they're so focused on themselves. This passage actually kind of saddens me because, how beautiful would it be to know that God is there? Or how sad is it that God is there and you miss it? Another scripture that saddens me is when God was in on the mountain with Moses, and Moses draws near, and the people of Israel they draw away and they're scared. So God was inviting them close, and they drew away, and it saddens me. Like, these are moments where God was there and speaking, and people missed it. God came down, and the ironic thing is they were building to the heavens, if you will, to God. They were trying to get to God, and God's like, let me come down. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
You don't have to build to get to me. I come down. And we see that, right? What is the best picture we have of God coming down? Jesus. Right? But think about the world Jesus came down to. In the midst of Rome, the Pharisees, and not all Pharisees are bad, I'm not saying that, but in the midst of the Rome, the Pharisees being hyper-focused on the law and hyper-focused on on how to build a kingdom, how to build a people, a religion that will actually help get God to bring favor on them so they can get out of the thumb of Rome, out from under the thumb of Rome. You got the Sadducees. You got all these people living under Roman occupation, right? You got that going on. And Jesus comes down, and so many didn't hear him that could have. And so many didn't see him that could have. So many missed him. And not because he was only in one place, because some of them were there. And he says, him who has ears, let him hear. Like, everybody had ears, but only some heard. And everybody had eyes, but only some actually saw him as Messiah. And I pray that we are those few today, at least, that we don't get so preoccupied with our agendas and life that we miss God in our moments. There's a book I read earlier this year, The Practice the Presence of God. It's by Brother Lawrence, a 16th century monastery cook. And in the book, he talks about how he senses God the same in the busyness of his kitchen as he does in the quietness of his prayer closet, of his prayer time. Like there's no difference. And he learned to live with such an awareness of God all the time and constantly praying to God and constantly not just like to God for things, just interacting with God on a regular, all the time basis, that he would feel this same level of peace in the hustle of his kitchen. I highly recommend the book. It's really, he didn't write a book. It's really a collection of letters and conversations and some notes, because he wasn't trying to write a book. He was a 16th century monastery cook. He wasn't even a monk. He was just a cook. But like this man, like people would travel because he understood. That's what his phrase. He just practiced the presence of God often.
Yeah.
It became so regular to him over the years that there was no difference. It was just the same.
Yeah.
And I pray we live life like that. I pray we get to those moments in our lives.
That's the key to pray without ceasing. Like it sounds so hard, but it's really just being aware that God is always near, and conversations with him never stop. We only lose conversation with him when we exit that conversation.
That's so good. Yeah. Yeah. So if we zoom out a little bit to this story is pretty bleak. They moved east, bad. They built a city, bad. Confused languages, being scattered, it's all kind of bad. They didn't ever see God, bad. But what's interesting is if you look at the scripture as a whole, Genesis 1, you have chaos to order, rest and peace. Genesis 2 and 3, you have covenant and tragedy, right? Genesis 4 and 5, you have a genealogy that brings us back to chaos. Because where does 6 start? Like the only inclination was only evil all the time. Genesis 6 through 8, you have chaos being brought to order with the flood. And then there's rest and peace. And then Genesis 9, you have a covenant and you have tragedy. And then Genesis 10 and 11, there's a genealogy that leads us back to chaos. It's as if all of the first 11 chapters of Genesis is one giant chiasm. Yeah. Not only are there chiasms throughout chapter 1 through 11, the entire portion of 1 through 11 is a giant chiasm. So like it is incredible. If you want to go deeper on this Genesis 1 through 11 chiasm, I'm actually going to link a podcast from the Bema discipleship that just deep dives into that for you guys. But it is incredible. I don't want to do a deep dive today. We've done a small deep dive into what chiasms are, but you kind of see the outline that just happened. But with all chiasms, they point to a treasure, a middle treasure. There's something in the middle that they point to. So what is that treasure? It's Genesis chapter 5, verse 28 and 29. I want you to read that, Mr. Chase Smith.
And Lamech lived 182 years and became the father of a son. Now he called his name Noah, saying, "This one shall give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands arising from the ground, which the Lord has cursed."
The entire chiasm of Genesis 1 through 11 points to Noah. Noah's name means rest. Yes. We did not plan that, but it sounded good, hopefully. Noah's name means rest. It points to the Ish being born and named rest. The man that would bring rest.
Interesting.
Rest to the labor and toil of the ground that was cursed at the fall of Adam and Eve.
Well, much later on, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest.
Mm-hmm.
Which harkens back to, in his time, they would have known the story. They would have had read all this by now, and they would know this truth as a part of their study of Torah, which every good Jewish boy did, by the way, not just the rabbis. They knew their Bible way better than we know our Bible, even if you went to go be a fisherman. So, fun fact. But like they would have harkened back to this, where it was like, oh, rest. Oh, this story is about someone whose name is Rest. They're all waiting for the Messiah, and Jesus is saying, come to me and I will give you rest. What he's doing is he's referring to this scripture, and he's referring to this set of 11 chapters. The whole Bible points to the Messiah, but he's calling himself the Messiah even in just that text, which refers to this text.
Yes.
A hyperlink.
It's a hyperlink. This text is a prophecy of Jesus, yet it's also Jesus hyperlinks back to it to make sure we understand.
Yes.
This is a prophecy about me.
Yeah.
And all of Genesis, the Genesis 1 through 11, it all points to this moment.
Mm-hmm.
The center of this intro, in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the curse, in the midst of men failing time and time and time again, rest is coming. There is a plan, and it is good. God is good. The Ish is coming. The man is coming. The seed of the woman is on his way. Keep on looking. So if we follow the pattern, right? If we follow the pattern, after chaos and darkness, we just talked about the pattern. After chaos and darkness, it's always chaos to order and rest and peace, right? Chaos to order, rest, and it always happens. And then there's chaos, and then descends into rest, and then God brings order somehow. So what should we expect next after the story of the Tower of Babel? A light, to put it in Genesis 1 terms, a light in the darkness. Because what's the first thing God creates in the chaos?
Light.
A light in the darkness. The start of bringing order to chaos. In Genesis 1, God used his voice.
Mm-hmm.
In Genesis 6, God used the flood.
Water.
What are we going to see next? Let's read Shem's genealogy. We start in Genesis chapter 11, verse 27. Before we go there, as we go there, there is a we're not going to read it, but it does say first one of Shem's sons is Eber, and Eber is actually where they get their word Hebrew.
Wow.
So that's a fun fact. So you wonder why we call them Hebrews? It's from this word Eber. It's the same root word, Eber. So yeah, that's a fun fact. But anyway, let's read Genesis 11:27.
Hebrew also means to cross over. Fun fact. There's a whole lot there. But anyway, 11:27. I'll keep reading and you interrupt.
Wait, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I trust you. Now these are the records of the generations of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran became the father of Lot. And Haran died...
Okay, hold on. Pause. Interruption. Abram, Nahor, Haran, Lot. Like, these are names we need to know, right? Haran's going to die, as you just read. But Nahor and Lot are people that we'll see throughout, and like their lineage we'll see throughout some of the scriptures, especially the story that we're about to get into, biblically speaking, in the story of Abraham. Go ahead.
And Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his birth, in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, and the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and Iscah.
Perfect. We'll stop there.
Okay.
So we've heard several genealogies so far. This is the third, maybe fourth genealogy, if you will, of the biblical story. And we have Lamech in the first one that we really highlighted, right? Lamech name. Do you remember what his name meant? It's like king spelled backwards. So that's what his name is. Like Melech is king in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
Like Melchizedek.
Oh,
right?
yes.
So like his name is like, it's like kind of like a reverse king is what we really highlighted and jumped into. That and what did he do? He took 2 wives. That's bad. Not good. We have at the end of the next genealogy, or at the end of that genealogy, we have sons of God who also took 2 wives, right? Multiple, bad, not good. This is not good. Here we have this interesting phrase that it says that they took wives. Like, we've kind of seen it before, but not. It says that Abram, I always want to call him Abraham because that's what we call him now. But Abram and who? Nahor took wives.
Yes.
Like, this is actually a redemptive scripture to me of those two. Like, this is bluntly saying this is not following the seed of the serpent. This is not Nimrod. Like this is kind of like Nimrod, right? Where Nimrod, that story around Nimrod, or the genealogy parts of Nimrod, directly harken back to and kind of slap Shem in the face, like saying, hey, your name meaning renowned, that's not what renown is. A renowned man isn't that. It's this. It's Nimrod. This is saying this isn't what men do. This isn't what sons of God do. This isn't right. This is it. This is Abraham. This is Abram, Nahor. We take one wife. But what's interesting is, why would they say their names? How often do we get a genealogy where 2 people take wives at the same time?
I can't think of one.
Yeah, I can't either. I'm not saying there's not, and if I'm wrong, please let me know. But like, not often, at least, right?
Yeah.
And so why is that? Why is this phrase said that way? Like, Abram and Nahor took wives. They took wives. If you read in the Hebrew, it's kind of like Abram and Nahor, they took wives. Well, that's kind of weird. What does that mean? Have we seen that kind of phrase before? Where 2 people do one thing?
We're not talking about God.
Shem and Japheth.
Yes. Oh, the nakedness.
They cover the nakedness. And we said whenever it's 2 people, I said, did 2 people need to take, it doesn't take 2 people to do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't take 2 people to marry a woman. Like, what is going on here? Why are we doing this? Why was it's phrased that way on purpose? It means in the Hebrew, there was an act of benevolence that happened.
Yes.
And the first person mentioned is the ones whose idea it was. And in Shem and Japheth, what they do? They cover their father's nakedness or shame. So what is the act of benevolence here? What shame is getting covered up here? So, fun fact. A lot of Jewish scholars believe, and a lot of scholars, like biblical scholars, believe that Sarah and Issachar are the same person. Some people don't disagree, and that's fine. You can disagree. I don't know. I'm not God. But Issachar in Chaldean, which is where they're from, Ur of Chaldea, right? Issachar in Chaldean is the name meaning princess. And Sarai is the Hebrew word for princess. So the names are the same. They have the same meaning. And so what's believed is that Abram, after his brother died, his 2 daughters would have no covering. They'd have no protection. They'd be living in shame if they don't get married. So Abram nudged his brother and was like, hey, let's marry those 2. And so that's what's believed. So Abram is covering, if that's the case, Abram is covering the shame of being unprotected in that culture. And it's his idea. Now, Abram chooses Sarah. If he's the older brother and he chooses Sarai, I always want to call her Sarah, just like Abraham. Sorry. He chooses Sarai. And Sarai is, in the text, is barren. And it seems like they know that. Like, it's just mentioned as if, like, it's a fact, not like they find out later. Like, she's barren. She's barren. So Abram chooses a barren woman. Now, whether you believe Sarai and Issachar is the same person, you don't have to. What we do know for sure is that she's barren, and Abram chose to marry her. When you choose to marry a barren woman, what does that mean?
You're not going to be able to carry on your family line or be fruitful and multiply.
Exactly. So in the story we just read, we had people who wanted to make a name for themselves. And then we get this moment here where Abram is juxtaposing that because he is forfeiting making a name, making his name known throughout the earth.
Yeah, wow.
And choosing to show compassion and cover shame, just like Shem, because he's a great-great-grandson of Shem. This is the line. This is the lineage, the legacy of Shem. And there we have Abram choosing to say, I don't need a lineage. I'd rather protect this vulnerable human in our day and age, right? Their day and age, right?
Wow.
So that's what we have. And then
That's
what
a whole other layer to this story that it adds. If you're familiar with, what comes up.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And in that moment, right after that moment, we get not directly after, but just shortly after, you get Genesis 12:1. And what is the first words of Genesis 12:1?
Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from
Wait. We just had a story where the God came down and no one heard him. And now we get a little quick story about Abram in the middle of a genealogy where Abram chose a barren woman, possibly to cover the shame of her losing her father. And God speaks and Abram hears. Like, this is the juxtaposition of the Tower of Babel. Like, why is the Tower of Babel first and this last? And I said it last episode. Maybe Shem's genealogy is last because it's saying God and good get the final word in the midst of all the chaos. And the entire chiasm of Genesis 1-11 points to God saying rest is coming. God, I'm getting the final word. Hold on. And then you'll get rest from the labor, from the curse. You'll get rest. And then we get Abram here, who is taking on the mantle, if you will, of Shem, that working into like covering shame and choosing to forfeit even a name. And his name literally means a great father. Like, his name means father, and he's like, I'm not even gonna be able to get that, but it's okay. And maybe as a joke, like, yeah, maybe Abram picked her because she was gorgeous, because later on, like, Pharaoh's like, she's gorgeous. Maybe that's the only reason. I mean, I'm not gonna say that's not possible.
True. That is in the text.
I'm not saying that's not possible, but it seems like you would rather have your line, especially in the old days, because who's gonna take over the work? Who's gonna do all that? It's like, you have kids to continue to propagate what you're doing to make it easier as you get older, especially back then. Like, that's why ranchers and farmers have like 8 kids to help them with the work. It's on purpose. And so what we have here is Abram saying, that's not what's important. What's important is taking care of this woman.
It's interesting. There's a beautiful woman who's also barren later in the story, but that's Jacob's, story. So,
yeah, it's interesting, right? As if like there's a cycle, there's a pattern, there's something, and it's quite incredible what this story does, because it seems like Jacob's story is hyperlinking back to somewhere in Genesis 1-11. It's so weird. So this is Genesis 1-11 is some people call it the preface of the entire biblical narrative, which is why it's the foundation. It's the intro. It's what I like to call the overture, right? Because with an overture, when you go to musicals or when you get to like what are they called? Classical music, and you get into operas, the overture that you hear at the beginning literally has every melody line that you're going to hear throughout the rest of the play in it. Now, you might hear it loud at sometimes, and it might be really soft and subtle at times, and there's going to be different lines they'll weave in and out of each other throughout the entirety of the play. And Genesis 1-11 is the overture. All of these themes we've been pulling out, and there's probably more themes we've missed and we couldn't get to for time's sake, but there are themes that you'll see in Genesis 1-11 as you're reading Exodus and Numbers, and as you're reading inside of 1 Kings, and as you're reading Psalms, and as you're reading Ecclesiastes, and as you're reading Isaiah and Jeremiah and Jonah, and as you go to the New Testament and you read the Gospels and you read the Acts and you read all the epistles and you read Revelation, these themes are still being played, sometimes quietly, and you got to really tune your ear, but sometimes loudly, and it's so obvious. Like, sometimes it's just like blah blah blah, and you're like, that makes so much sense. I hear bah 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 bah, and I'm like, oh man, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. I heard it.
That is actually, I was thinking about as you were talking about. That's so funny. If you ever want to know like what true overtures are, and you're like a nerd like us and you like Star Wars, like what John Williams, thank you,
the genius.
He's a genius, because if you go to the breakdown, just look up breakdown of Star Wars theme songs, and you'll notice that I think what it is that the theme for Darth Vader is either it is the opposite playing of like what is like Luke Skywalker's theme song. And they all have theme songs throughout, but then some of them are slower, some of them are faster. But like it's basically once they write the overture, they know what the rest of the music throughout the play or movie will be. And this is actually done in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's going to be done in others. But these are like the movies that all have like there's a ton of movies to them. So anyway, I think it's really beautiful. Like I didn't realize how beautiful it was when you told me this is the overture. And like I love classical music as well. So it's very apropos for this and how this does catapult us into the rest of the Bible, which is our point, right? Like that's the point of you're writing all of this template. So kudos to you for putting this together
Thank
the
you.
way that you have.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Genesis 1 through 11, guys. This was paramount for us to start here directly after the groundwork. This is kind of in effect still groundwork of sorts, but it's 1 through 11. We like to call it just the 1 through 11 or whatever, the first 11, because that is really paramount in seeing these themes just throughout everything. So as we continue, you're gonna get we're gonna get out of Genesis next, and we're gonna be moving into the Sermon on the Mount, and it's both of our. To me, it's basically the next most important scriptures. Like again, if you had to put a gun to my head and say what are the most important scriptures, I'd be like Genesis 1 through 11. What's the second most? I'd be like the Sermon on the Mount. That's the those because Genesis 1 through 11 sets the story. The Sermon on the Mount is essentially how to live in the story, the way God designed.
It's beautiful. I was telling my fiance like all about that before I left. She was like, "What are you going to be doing?" So I like kind of like talked about it, and I was like, "I think we're doing Sermon on the Mount next." And yeah, we've done that in Bible study. It's one of my favorites. I do love Matthew as well, but like that book of the gospel and how it's written around Jesus' life. It's beautiful.
What's fun for us is like the more I dive into any book, the more I love it.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, oh, Esther's cool. And then I read a book about Esther and I start diving into it. I'm like, Esther's one of the best books I've ever read. And then I'm like, let me just talk. I want to deep dive into Matthew for fun. And I'm like, this is the best book I've ever read. What is going on? And then I just keep going. Like I'm like, there's a daunting task of diving into Daniel. I'm like, I want to do it so bad, but I know like what's gonna happen is I'm gonna spend like 18 years of my life just being like, this is one of the most incredible. And when I say best and incredible, what I'm saying is not like the story. That's fine. Like I know the story, like the context. I understand. Literally, the literature and how it's put together. The word choices so precise. The way it ties into the greater narrative. All of it. You're just like, oh man. Which is why, like we say, like our heart here is always going to be you hoping we help you fall in love with the Bible.
Yeah.
Because we've fallen in love with it. And if there's a book you don't love, trust me, there's books I'm still like, I don't know. And then I hear a teaching or two on it, and I'm like, oh my God, I really need to read all of Leviticus, like start to finish, and see how it ties in, because it's so good. It's so good. Like, you don't even understand. Like, there are teachings out there about, like, there are so many teachings, guys, and I'll probably get to some of them, but oh my goodness, like, Leviticus is also brilliant. All of the books of the Bible are brilliant. And so when you say you love Matthew, yeah, Matthew's brilliant. If I had to pick a favorite gospel, it might be John, and probably for different reasons than like the average human.
Yeah.
That reads John, but like but I do love Matthew, and I've done a lot more study in Matthew than I actually have in John. Matthew is so cool, but partially because of the Sermon on the Mount. So that being said, guys, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking this journey with us, and we hope to see you definitely on our next episode, the next journey where we go from here. And Chase, let's pray it all out.
Yeah. Yivrecha Yahweh verishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom. Thanks, guys. Thanks for embarking on this podcast journey with us at Hyperlink. Your support means the world to us as a listener-supported podcast. If you've enjoyed our episodes and would like to contribute, please consider visiting patreon.com/hyperlinkpodcast. Stay connected with us by joining our community on Facebook at Hyperlink, a podcast journey. If you have any questions or would like to book us for an event, please feel free to email us at hyperlinknigel@gmail.com. Thank you once again for tuning in and being a part of the Hyperlink Collective. See you on the next episode.